I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Hello, and welcome back to the most dangerous animal of all after show, episode 2. It's a lot to say. I'm your host, Latoya Blakely, and I am joined by my amazing co-host. We're going to get started with Lisa Macy, who is a California native and a buff on all things history, especially California history.
Absolutely.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And then we have Cody Epperson, who just cannot say no to a good mystery.
Heck no, I'm so into this.
Yeah.
I'm excited to have you both. If you all tuned into our previous after show, we had a really good conversation. And so I'm really excited to delve into episode 2. We're going to talk about a lot of things, including what happens when an ice cream romance goes sour.
Yes.
We're back with our chilling special segment, and then we have some great news. So make sure you stay tuned. Let's just get started. So, ice cream turned sour. We finished episode 1 with the end of the romance between Jude, Judy, and Van. She has left him and gone back to California. He reports her, and they both end up getting arrested. Him definitely arrested. I'm not really sure what they did to her. She got sent to like a juvenile detention facility for girls. He went to, I'm going to go to Lisa for this name because I think she can say it better than I can.
He was sent to 90 days in the Atascadero State Mental Hospital, and they treat sexually deviant and criminally insane males there, a maximum security facility.
So he underwent chemical and
medical treatments and electroconvulsive therapy. That's
right.
a mouthful.
That is a whole lot to say.
Right.
And so when he gets out, that's when people started saying that, like, his eyes were lifeless. So I think that it could be fair to say that, well, actually, he did that, and then he got sent to San Quentin to do a 4-year stint, which I think he did 3 years of. And so it was after that experience, I think that he really changed. So Van was already questionable and had a questionable upbringing with his mom, has gone through this experience of being obsessed with Jude. He's been arrested several times, and this is just kind of like the final thing. When he gets out, he calls her again. She refuses to see him. And then we find out that he soon marries his third wife, Edith. Cody, can you tell us what happened with that marriage and your thoughts about it?
It didn't last very long as far as didn't they get married, I think, after like 3 months or something, and then they were together for maybe like a year and a half, and then it was like, she said that it was all like lovey-dovey at first, and then very quickly she was like, he is oh wait, I might be mixing Gary and Van up. Are you asking about Gary's marriage or Van's marriage?
Wow.
I think I'm describing the wrong
Gary
marriage.
had a lot of marriages too. We're going to talk about those. But right now we're talking about Van and Edith.
Van and Edith. No. I was all gung-ho about talking about Gary's marriages.
Okay, I'll jump in. So Van and Edith, they meet. I'm not sure if we find out how they meet or even how long they dated, but that they were married for about a year, I think, and she got pregnant in kind of the same situation. So he calls his best friend. Lisa, do you have that name? Do you know that name?
I do.
I do too. Lomas. I think that was
Yeah,
the last name.
William Lomas, I believe.
Okay, there we have
I
it.
believe that.
And so Van tells him, I'm not excited about this kid. I don't want a kid. He's unemployed again, right? So he's about to have the birth of a second child. He doesn't have a job. And we find out that he turns to drugs and the hippie scene of that time. And he starts hanging out with very questionable people, including someone that, like, was arrested and I think sentenced to life in prison for killing someone. So this guy's hanging out with Charles Manson's friends and followers, and then also hanging out with the founder of the Church of Satan.
Yeah, that was a trip to hear about that one.
So that's a lot, right? Lisa, what do you think about this?
Drastic.
Yeah, such an evil man, obviously, and very wrapped up with people are evil. I also put that they had said that he was fascinated with the occult. He was friends with this Bobby. I don't know how you say his last name. He was one of Charles Manson's followers. They were in a band together, apparently. Then he started following Anton LaVey, I think is how you say his name, the founder of the Church of Satan. And a lot of these things were, he had a hatred of his mother. He was abandoned by his father. He grew up violent towards women. He was violent towards his wives. So his rage was just growing all these years. And just a lot of evil building.
Did you all notice when they started talking about Van's childhood? So this is the information you gave us. The father abandoned him. He hated his mom. He had this violence towards women. In episode 1, they talk about how the mom was promiscuous and how this was such a hard life for
Gary.
Van.
Oh, Van.
But then we find out that, like, at some point he lived in Japan when his parents were missionaries, and they would go to these plays, and his father taught him how to, like, code break. So I was a little confused. I was like, did he have a good life? And did he live and travel internationally and go to plays? Or was he, like, abused and mistreated and...
Yeah.
Right? Like...
Yeah, it's just, like, the more that unfolds, the more, like, obscure. It's just, like I said, it's just so... I want to get to the end of it because I'm just like, what is going on? Like, what are these people going through and how did we get here?
How did we get here?
Yeah.
And when did the dad leave? Because if he had been, like...
Van's dad.
If you'd been teaching your son how to break codes and you all made this into a game and...
Didn't they say that it was when Van's dad was in World War II, his mom was cheating on Van's dad, and then when he came back, they divorced, and Van's dad moved to Chicago, and Van's mom took Van and moved to San Francisco, and then became very promiscuous. And well, I guess she was promiscuous all along, apparently.
So he had some good years. It wasn't all bad.
Right? Yeah.
And he held on to those bad years more than he leaned into the good years.
Exactly.
So we're a long way from the ice cream romancer.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that was bad enough, right? He's hitting on underage girls in ice cream shops.
Waiting outside of school buses. I mean,
right.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
But now we've moved into... Well, I'm not even sure what we've moved into.
Like
we have
just
this wife,
a newer, darker chapter.
Right? Who, like, leaves him and flees the country. She moves to Austria with her kids. And whatever happened was so bad that, like, that family wanted nothing to do with Gary and nothing to do with Van's family. That's a lot.
Yeah. So that was another wife, the one that moved to Austria. That was,
I think that was the last wife. And at some point we found out that there was a wife before Jude.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I don't remember what
that
episode
was
we
kind of
found
snuck
that
in there.
Right?
Yeah.
So, like,
I noticed that. Yeah. Kind of
here's
snuck in.
Van with 3 wives at 31, maybe?
Yeah.
Like, if we did the math, early 30s, I would think.
I think
Something
so.
like that, yeah. He's out
He
of
was
control.
busy.
He was definitely busy. He was very busy.
Yeah.
I think that's a good time for a break and to slide on in with this live read, Cody.
Yeah, guys. Thank you all for watching and listening. Thank you for making us the ESPN of TV Talk. We are so thankful to have you. Please like us, subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening on iTunes, like, give us a thumbs up. Comment. We love to respond and we love to have a conversation going. If anything you notice that, like, we don't, like, please let us know. Like I said last episode, like, I've been here for like 4 months now. I'm always stoked to be put on a panel, especially one that's as interesting and, like, twisted as this one. Like, it's super exciting. So thank you guys so much for listening and giving us love, because we love you.
Yes.
So we know that Van is progressing in terms of getting worse, making worse decisions, hanging out with killers, becoming more violent with his wives. As we're learning this information, we also learn that Gary one night is watching TV, and he is watching a crime show, a Most Wanted show, and they put up a picture of a man that he says, wait a second, that's my dad.
That's right.
A cold case. I think it was an episode of Cold Case.
Yeah.
And that picture flashed up there, and it looked just like the photo of his father.
Did they say that it was the Zodiac Killer? Do you remember?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, they
so
did.
they did say it was the Zodiac Killer.
Yeah.
And so Gary is convinced that this is his dad. This makes him research and investigate his dad even more. He wants to find him even more so, and he brings in an author, Susan Mustafa, who's going to help him, because Gary has like chapters and chapters and chapters written about his father. And so Susan is brought in to help him, I guess, put this information together. Maybe the idea for the book has already been born. And Susan says, yes, you have researched Earl.
Or Van, I guess
Right?
they call him Van throughout it. Yeah,
You've researched Van a lot. Now it's time for us to research the Zodiac Killer. So they go to San Francisco to start researching the Zodiac Killer. And Jude comes back, right?
Yes, she does.
Jude shows back up. And does she send Gary back to Harold?
Is Harold the detective?
Harold,
Yeah.
right. From the very beginning, he was helpful.
Okay, just making sure I'm on the right page.
Yes, I
A
think
lot of characters, a lot of people I know.
I think that maybe she does send him back to Harold, and Harold tells her, tell your son to like leave it alone, right? Like he knows enough, he needs to leave it alone. Well, now we find out that Jude's second husband, a lot of spouses in this story.
Everyone's getting married all the time.
Right? Because I think Jude now has a third husband. Right?
Yeah.
But right now we're on the second husband, whose name is... Ooh. What's the name? Someone have the name. Okay, I can't remember his name, but he's an inspector with San Francisco PD. And he did work on the Zodiac Killer case. I was a little confused about this. Maybe you two can help me out. There was some insinuation that they wanted to preserve the second husband's reputation. And so that's why they didn't want Gary to delve into this case.
I'll be honest, it confused me too. I had to watch it back a couple times. Yeah, they were saying that. I wasn't quite sure what they were trying to say. That were they saying that they thought that he knew that his wife had previously dated someone who could possibly be the Zodiac Killer? I wasn't quite sure what connection they were trying to make there.
Yeah, I wasn't sure either, because I think at one point they mentioned that he was considered a hero of the San Francisco Police Department, but they never explained why he was considered a hero, nor have they yet explained, how his linking to the Zodiac case could somehow like mess up that reputation. So then I started wondering, well, is he really the Zodiac Killer? The ex-husband,
right.
because it was just a really weird link that they were trying to make.
Yeah.
Did y'all pick up on that?
Yeah, unless they didn't, because he had such a stellar reputation. Like Judy even said, if he knew who the Zodiac Killer was, he would have solved the case. Like it would have looked better for him. So I don't know. Unless, I'm not quite sure what.
I'm not
they were
sure
trying
about
to
that
say.
either.
That confused me also.
Another thing.
It's
that,
just
like,
another
feels
like little
weird.
mystery that's just like within the mystery itself. It's just like, what?
Right.
Why? Why are you doing this?
Right.
And what happened to the second husband?
That's
Do
a
we
good point.
know?
They didn't talk about that at all. No, they didn't talk about it.
Okay, I'm like,
Yeah.
I need answers to
I
these
know.
questions. I need to know who this man is, what he had to do with the Zodiac Killer, and like why Harold would not want his name to come out.
Right.
Because that's just very weird to me. It's a little interesting.
Yeah, I feel like Jude and whatever her deal is, there's just like some weird, and her like, I don't remember, and her not wanting to remember. It's just like she somehow is just tied into this and like won't tell us.
Yeah.
Tell
Tell
us.
us, Jude.
Yo, I'm like, it's so bothering me that I cannot find his name.
Can I just say, pages and pages of notes? I'm telling you,
I
there's
know,
so
so
many
many.
details, so many names and details, and it's a lot to keep track of,
I'm gonna find it. At some point I'm gonna find it.
Yes,
Maybe
I do
was
have it too.
episode 1. I
It'll
don't
come
know.
to you in the middle of the night.
Episode 1, that's why. Ratea Guilford was the second husband. So it looks like we were actually introduced to him in the first episode, at the very end of the first episode. So Gary, I'm like, these names.
I know.
I need a map. We need to like write it.
We need like the
when
board
you're-
that they have in
when
the
you're, like, trying
office.
to solve a crime and you lay it all
With
out.
pictures and everything. Yeah.
So Gary sees the picture, says, "This is my dad." Brings Susan in. They go to San Francisco, and now they're researching the Zodiac Killer. And it looks like, and I was a little confused by how many people he actually killed up until this point, because I felt like the numbers kept changing, or they would like
I had
say
to like
something.
look into it after, like, while I was watching. I'd be like, who did he kill and what's going on?
Right. So like they would say one thing, and then the actual footage, like news footage from that time, would like say something else, and it wasn't really matching up.
Right.
So I was a little confused.
And actually, I put down that the Zodiac Killer himself had actually claimed that he had done 37
Yes.
murders.
So by the time it was all said and done, it was 37.
Well,
That's what
he
he
claimed.
says.
I don't think that was ever proven. Yeah, that he did 37, but he said he did.
And there's like 4 or 5 that like he's suspected to be the murderer in these cases, but they don't have the proof of it.
Right.
That's so interesting. So he, I think, kills 2 people, right? And then he sends a letter.
And he's like, oh, this is how you know I did it, because I know the type of ammunition that was used, and I know where they were shot and what direction they were facing when they died. Like,
Yeah.
he basically the information that only the murderer and the police would know.
Right, right. And then at some point, was the cipher in that letter? Do you remember? Or was it a later letter that contained the cipher?
Ooh.
And I know there was
there were,
multiple
I think, there were
Right.
multiple.
That may have been.
that doesn't matter. Cody, what did you think about the cipher? And what did you think about Van's demand that you publish the cipher, or I'm going to kill more people?
I feel like it's such like I mean, it's a horrible threat, but it's like being in like the police or the Chronicles position. Like, how do you like not abide by that? It's like, okay, well, we're not gonna post like we're like it's Instagram. We're not gonna print this because this is I guess a really weird form of like blackmail. But like it's like, well, you don't want that on your hands, like, oh, 2 more people died because we didn't print this, you know? It's just, but at the same time, like, we were kind of saying earlier, like, maybe if like they just didn't, he would have been like, oh, well, they're not playing my game, so I guess I'll just move on.
Yeah.
But actually, to your point, the question you're asking, so yes, in July 1969, that very first letter did tell all the details of those 2 people he had killed, and he did say, print the cipher at the front page of the article, and if you can figure this out, this is my identity, and if you don't print this, I'll go on a kill rampage. And he sent that to the San Francisco Chronicle, the Examiner, and also the Vallejo Times, with 3 different ciphers on there, though. And he said, if you can, figure out this code, you'll know who I am.
So to what you were saying, Cody, I'm sorry.
No.
Okay.
Good.
I think the first time, right? Like that's the kind of decision-making, weighing process is like, what happens if we don't post it? What happens if we do post it? And so I can understand the first time why they posted it. But he continued to kill.
Yeah, he kills anyway.
Right, yeah.
And they continue to post.
Yeah.
Anytime he sent them a letter, based on what we see in episode 2, it looks like they would release the letter, right? And like share the letter and continue to share the ciphers. What did you think about that, Lisa?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't even think about the fact, you're right, that he kept killing anyway. I see where if he's saying he's going to go on a mass killing spree, I get why they want to, try to avoid that. But he killed anyway, you're right. So I don't know. It's funny, like in this day and age, like if something like that were to happen, I don't think papers would print that, I don't know. It's hard to.
I feel like that would get like swept under the rug and like, oh, we're gonna take this to a higher power who's gonna take charge of this, because that's
right.
I mean, it just seems like maybe at the time of this was happening, it seems like now that we're discussing it, excuse me, that it was like a media circus. Like maybe it was just all like everyone's own publicity because it's. Yeah, like why would you? Yeah, like I can't even like say the words. So I'm just like it's
crazy.
It's crazy.
That they would keep just posting. And I think at one point in the newspaper, like he had written in a letter and they posted it in the newspaper, like, keep your daughters out of the alleys and blah, 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 and blah, 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 because I will kill them. And I'm like, you posted that.
Right.
You posted that in your newspaper.
I know.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And it's crazy that they had no suspects. They had no suspects. They had no clues. They, like, had nothing.
What I thought one thing that was really weird was when when he kills the taxi driver and there's fingerprints on the taxi, but then he goes around and says in a message or a letter that, I don't leave fingerprints because I do this to my fingers. But it's like, but there's fingerprints.
Right.
And I even turned to my roommate and I was like, is he just lying? Like, is that a lie? Like, it's so...
And how crazy was that the police actually walked by, they stopped
They
the Zodiac
stopped and
Killer and asked if he
him.
saw anything suspicious. Yeah. But someone had called in an African American, so they weren't looking at him. And
I love that they just glossed over that. But since you
Yeah,
brought
right?
it
It was
up,
just like
we're going to talk about
and then I just walked away.
First of all, I want to know where they got this description from of the killer, saying that he was African American.
Yeah, that was like so. Like, who said that? Like, who's the first one to say it?
Right.
Yeah.
Because the detective shows up, talks to these kids, and he says immediately the kids were like, no, it was a white guy.
Yeah, right.
Like, how does this happen?
Yeah.
And like you said, the police stopped the Zodiac Killer, and they ask him, have you seen anything suspicious? And he says, yeah, I saw someone waving a gun. And so they just like...
And then they're like, and then they just burned rubber and left is what they said. It was like, that was it? That's all you needed to just like bolt down the street?
I have some clients who wish it was that easy to get a police off their backs. Yeah, no, that was craziness. But back to the fingerprint thing. I mean, I am under the belief that they really were his fingerprints. And he just like slipped up and was then angry, really at himself for his own mistakes.
And then just tried to lie about it.
Yeah, and tried to like spin it. Right? Because then he writes that letter and he's telling the police, like he even says to the police, oh, you almost had me, but you're so gullible.
Yeah, right.
That like all I had to do is tell you this and you drove off and that was the end of that.
Yeah.
That's a lot happening.
Yes.
And let's talk about the way he's killing these people. So he shoots them and or stabs them. And so they said that he targeted women more than men and he was more violent towards women than he was to men.
Yeah.
But even with that, I kind of felt like they were cowardly killings.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right?
A lot of times they were just like sitting ducks in a car. He just came up and shot, shot innocent people just sitting in the car. So exactly, they couldn't even defend themselves if they wanted to.
And so I don't understand how that feeds your need to punish. Because it is so cowardly and so like easy to do and like...
Yeah.
One thing that I actually realized in the time we've been here doing these 2 episodes is that one thing I noticed when I was like looking into it outside of the episode, like I was Googling like what the murders were. They're all for the most part, they're all very young and they're all like 16, 17, 19 to 22 years old. And I was like, why is he killing all these young people? And then after we discussed the ice cream romance, what was that called? Ice cream.
Yeah.
Then he kind of has that like weird pedophilia thing going on, and then and then there's this hatred towards women, and obviously he was so obsessed with Jude, and I just feel like it all ties in. Like he has this anger towards women, and it's also I think there's still something in the back of his head that has that like he's going after such young people that I think there is like a weird that pedophilia thing is still there, and it's like. I think with one of the cases that was in the car with like a couple, it was like he shot the one guy in the head, but then stabbed the one girl like 5 times. Or no, he shot her like 5 times, but she also was trying to get away.
Right.
And it's just like, it's really sick. And then this is something I missed, so now I'm just going on a rant, was that I didn't realize that Van himself also had like a horrible upbringing where his mother was... either abusive or not around, and the father was, which is very similar to how Gary feels about Van, was like the mother was not there and the father abandoned him, and it's just all this very weird like trickle down effect of everything kind of coming together, and like I just thought that was weird. That's something I realized maybe like 10 minutes ago. It was like, oh, he's killing young people, and he also has he's kind of sick in the head when it comes to being attracted to younger women.
And as you say that, it makes me wonder if there was a sense of jealousy of like seeing these young couples who were like happy to be together, and he didn't have that, and so he was exacting revenge on these people who like had something that he didn't have. We're getting close to the end of time, and so I want to talk about this very quickly. So going back to Gary is convinced that the Zodiac Killer is his father. And so when he's reviewing these cases, he's trying to make the connections. Some of the connections that he made were the fingerprints. Apparently, Van had a scar on a finger that matches a scar left on the cab.
It was identical. Did you see?
Yeah,
I mean, that
it was like very,
Yeah.
like, what are the chances?
Yeah.
Now, there was a fingerprint expert who said that you cannot compare scars.
Right.
But, like, based on
But,
what we
like-
saw, that was
Yeah.
pretty
Right.
similar.
Uh-huh.
So we have that, and then we have handwritings. A handwriting expert was brought in to review the handwriting of the Zodiac Killer in these letters, and then handwriting of Van in specifically the marriage certificate and maybe something else. And the handwriting expert says that it was substantially similar. I don't remember the exact words. And then he went, strong probability. Is
Strong
what he said.
probability. Yeah, he
Right.
used very specific terminology.
Right, and then he went on to say that means virtually certain.
Right.
Yeah.
That it was
Yeah.
written by the same person.
I'm like, this is what it is.
Right. So we have those two things. And then we also have that apparently Van lived like a block away or 2 blocks away from where the
The cab.
had been like held and killed.
Right.
So like Gary's like building the case of why the Zodiac Killer is his dad. And then the link to Mexico. So
Yeah.
the Zodiac Killer,
yeah.
he kills, or like before he kills a couple, wants the car, and he says he needs the car to drive to Mexico. And we know that Van would often go to Mexico because that's how he was making his money. And so I do agree that Gary has made some compelling arguments for why he believes that Van is the Zodiac Killer.
Oh, and don't forget that his father was a code breaker and taught him how to decipher codes. I mean, that's crazy. You know?
Right. And it's crazy that it was a high school teacher and wife that broke that code.
Right.
Like the police couldn't do it,
Exactly.
and no one else could do it, and that it was a high school teacher. What do you think? So, the police never found a name in these ciphers. It's actually Gary that finds the dad's name in the ciphers. Do you think that he found the names because they were really there, or do you think he found the names because he wanted them to be there?
That was I kind of think. I mean, I guess we have to see how it all like wraps up.
Right.
But when he first was saying, "Oh, I found his name in the after it was deciphered," I was like, "But you are looking for that name specifically. Like, if you give anybody, even just not even a cipher,
Cipher.
if you're in like a cross or a word search, like you can find any word you really want to if you're looking for it, you know. But it was what I thought was made it a little more believable was that it was like the name Earl Van Best lined up 1 letter every column in order. But it did seem like a very plausible stretch is how I'm gonna phrase that.
Yeah. What do you think, Lisa?
I agree. I mean, there's some very compelling clues here. Some things that really link it. That to me wasn't quite as compelling. It was interesting, like you said, that there was a letter in every column. But again, to your point, you can find a lot of different things that way.
Yeah.
So that wasn't the biggest.
And they're pretty normal letters. Earl Van Best.
Right.
Yeah,
You
there's
know?
no like
W's,
Q's or
right.
J's. Like
Exactly. Yeah.
So there was a lot that happened. I think that episode 2 ends with Gary being convinced that the Zodiac Killer is him. And so now he's on even a stronger quest to really find his dad. We do find out that the dad kind of went off the radar for several years. He shows back up. There's an FBI file. I don't know if we found out yet what's in the FBI file, but we also find out that Van died in Mexico alone, that he drunk himself to death and was strangled or suffocated by his own vomit. And so he dies in Mexico. He's buried in Mexico. And so I think that episode 3 will open up with Gary traveling to Mexico. There was a lot. in that episode.
There sure was.
And there was so much more that we
Like,
could talk about.
I honestly feel like I needed to go and rewatch them
I
because
know,
I'm like, even just our discussion, I was like, what? That's what happened? Like, how did I miss that?
So much. But we're going to have to move on to our chilling special segment.
Yes. So our murderer child I have for this one is...
And by murderer child...
that came up. Yeah, that came up pretty bad.
The child of infamous serial killers.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I believe her name is Jen Carson. So her parents are the San Francisco witch killers. Their names are Michael Carson and his second wife, Susan. They met in the early 1980s, and together they got into heavy drugs and mysticism and counterculture of San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury district. They came to believe they had a God-oriented mission to eliminate those deemed as witches. And they killed 3 people before they were caught and confessed in 1983. They never showed any remorse for their crimes. But then Michael's daughter Jen was 9 years old at the time that her father went to prison. She says that first she didn't cope well with what her dad did, struggling with depression and eating disorder in her teens. She also attempted to commit suicide at the age of 10. I guess the father, like when the father remarried the second wife, she was like, he completely changed. Like she's like, my father's a completely different person now. And like, I guess they would like beat her and like abuse her. They like would leave her like unfed and alone for like extended periods of time. And now she works as a child and adolescent counselor to young people whose parents had been sent to prison. And she's also made efforts to reconcile with the families of her father's victims.
Wow.
Oh,
So
wow.
this one has a bit of a lighter ending. Like she went through a lot. I mean, just to have like your parent or parents or guardians be murderers is enough to deal with, but she obviously went through it.
Right.
And she's come out the other side of this tunnel. I'm sure she's still scarred from it, but at least she's trying to do something better for people who are similar situations.
Right, that's
which is nice.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Lisa, do you have some news for us?
Excuse me.
AfterBuzz TV News.
It's always so exciting. So I don't know about you guys, but like, Susan Mustafa, I just think she's so cool. I don't know, you know.
Yeah,
the
I
one
kind of
that
want
co-wrote-
to like grab a drink with her
I
and
know,
like chat.
right?
Like,
Yeah.
She reminds me of like the dog hunter people.
Yes,
The bounty hunter people.
exactly. Yes, good point. I don't know. So I thought it was interesting that at first she didn't want to write this story. You know, she said she gets a lot of people saying, "Oh, I know who the Zodiac Killer is," and she's written a lot of stories herself, and so she didn't want to tarnish her image. But I thought it was interesting once she read the manuscript that he had, then she started saying, "Oh my gosh, she's really got something here." So I just wanted to see what she's been up to since the show aired, and she is actually living in Louisiana right now, and she has several television projects for the Discovery Channel and was on an episode of Born to Kill. And actually, her DNA testing and some of her investigative work has radically transformed that process. So she's helping with DNA testing as well.
Oh, wow.
And
oh, cool.
so she's giving back too. You know,
That's
What-
amazing.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, I want to learn more about her though. She just seems like a fascinating person.
Yeah.
You know?
I wonder how she got started. I'll have
That's
to
a
look
good
that
question.
up.
Yes, we'll find that out. Yeah.
Time for predictions.
Your AfterBuzz TV predictions.
Lisa, you want to start?
Okay, so we think that he is going to Mexico. Gosh, I don't even know. I don't even know what to predict what's coming next. There's so many twists and turns. I don't know. I don't even know. We'll see what's coming.
Okay.
I don't know. I
Alright.
don't know how I can guess what's coming. You
Well,
know?
I know, right? It's so
Yeah.
like it could be anything at
Right,
this point. It's
yeah.
like everything is so outrageous, and I'm like, what?
Exactly.
What is next?
Yeah.
Do you think that Van is the Zodiac Killer?
I mean, everything is. I think based on what I've seen so far, I would be led to believe that there's some pretty compelling evidence there.
Yeah. What about you, Cody? Predictions.
I don't know if it's. I don't think we're going to, but I would like to think that the family in I think Austria that was like, no, Gary, we ain't talking to you.
Yeah.
I would like to think that they're gonna like give us a little something to like nudge us in the right direction. But about him actually being the Zodiac Killer, about Van actually being the Zodiac Killer, it really seems like he is, but a part of me doesn't think so. Like, but at the same time, like he's literally the picture like on the main like thing of the whole series. So it's like, but I don't know. Part of me doesn't necessarily think it is him.
Quick point, because you just brought this up. We found out at the end of this episode that there was actually a different suspect who was like the main suspect, remember? And that he, you know, declared, I guess, until his death that he wasn't the Zodiac Killer. Do you remember that? Them talking about that?
Oh, yeah.
My prediction is that we learn a little bit more about him and kind of the information that he gave San Francisco Police Department in investigating the Zodiac Killer. And I would also hope for / predict that we learn more about Jude's second husband.
Yes.
And the role that he played in the Zodiac Killer's case.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Good
Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. It's been a great show. We've had a lot to talk about, but our time with you is up today. Thank you to my amazing co-host. Where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Lisa M. Macy. Lisa, 2 M's, ASI.
And you can find me on Instagram at Cody F, CODYYEPP. And also my Project Runway After Show. Season finale is tomorrow. Tune in.
I'm Latoya Blakely. You can find me on Instagram at Latoya_Blakely or Twitter at Blakely Latoya. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, buzz you later.
Bye.
Our founder, Kevin Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.